All right. I think we're live, and I'm also running the recording for the blog.
Perfect.
You
Can you hear me okay?
You showing we're live on your end, Josh?
Yep, I see us as live. We look good to go.
All right.
Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome everybody. Make sure you say where you're tuning in from below. Say hi.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Cameron Dunlap here with my good friend and business partner, Mr. Josh Brown. Say hey to Josh. All right. This is the Real Estate Wealth Network Strategy Lab number 6. Yep.
Yes.
That look right? Yep.
That look right.
6 weeks now for us being shut in New York. Some of you guys are joining us from states where you didn't get shut in at all. And some of you are joining us from states where they're starting to relax some of that, like South Carolina, right, Josh? You guys are getting more relaxed there?
Yeah. It's started relaxing quite a bit. It's not a full-on open up of the economy, but they're doing things like 20% of retail stores, 20% of capacity can go in, that kind of thing. Still only to go food at restaurants. They're opening up some parks and things, but they're still not opening up like the restrooms and the building facilities at those parks. But it's a little bit closer to open, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the media and politicians have done such a brilliant job of scaring folks that even as we start to relax a little bit, it's going to be, for some, it'll be a long time before they come out and are willing to do certain things. My mom and my mother-in-law, both of them, I doubt either of them will come out of their, we talked about this last week where we're like snapped into our shells.
Yep.
And I doubt either of them are going to start coming out of their shells probably until, who knows, June or July.
Yeah.
I think more testing and just bigger data sets will make some of the folks who are extremely uncomfortable more comfortable. But I think even if Governor Cuomo said, all right, New York is open everywhere, the entire state right now, people would emerge very, very slowly.
Yeah.
I have no doubt in my mind about that. So I've got some things I want to cover, sort of like I do here, some updates on my observations in the news with what's going on, and as they pertain to us. We've got forbearances now up to a total of 3.4 million, 477,000 more last week. Just about 10% of FHA and VA loans are in forbearance right now. And, you might say, well, what does that mean to us? If you're in forbearance, you got a break on your mortgage payments. So what? Well, it's crushing the mortgage industry, although the Fed did just stand up a backstop, if you will, for the servicing industry, which is good because the way it was working is in a forbearance, the servicer would have to pay the investor for all the months of your forbearance. And that was going to basically put servicers out of business. And servicers are basically the loan, the banks that you're making your payment to. I do think that a large number of forbearances will end up foreclosures, especially for those that have lost a job in their household or maybe more than one job. I think forbearance has always been, and I've been through a lot of these cycles, and the last one in particular. Forbearance was really just a way to stall the inevitable. I think in this case, it isn't going to be as high a percentage of forbearance that go to foreclosure because there wasn't any requirement that you prove hardship. Basically, the politicians stood up in front of the camera and said, go get a forbearance. Why not?
Yeah.
And government-backed loans, which is, FHA, VA, Freddie, Fannie, and that type of, those types of loans, they're getting 180-day forbearance, and that might then, if the borrower chooses, be followed by another 180 days. So based on that and a lot of what I'm watching and reading and studying, I think it's pretty safe to say that that there is a looming foreclosure crisis that will come out of this. And I think it's going to be a 2021 thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks are going to push, kick the can down the road and then finally realize that they're just not going to be able to even start making payments 180 or 360 days from now. So there's a correlation there. I'm not sure what it'll be. And if you look at historical data from the crash in 2008 and the following foreclosure crisis, I'm not sure those numbers are, applicable because of the sort of, permission that the government gave everybody to do a forbearance. There were just under 4.5 million new unemployment claims last week. That brings the 5-week total to 26 million total unemployment claims. Compared to the size of the labor force, that's 11%. Although I think it's next week, we're going to get unemployment numbers, and they adjust them in a number of ways. And based on those adjustments, right now it's sitting at 23% based on how unemployment is reported, and comparing apples to apples. To give you some context of that, 23% unemployment is comparable to what we saw in the Great Depression, which was 24.9%. 24.9%. And here's a quote that translates. So 26 million now unemployment claims translates to a barely believable 23% when the Labor Department releases its unemployment rate calculation in 2 weeks. So this was, I found this reading yesterday, and that's according to Paul Ashworth. He's the chief U.S. economist at Capital Economics. The previous high in the U.S. was 24.9 during the Great Depression. Frankly, if this week we see another 2, 3 million, 4 million, we're going to be above that.
Yep.
That is frightening. So going back to the concept of foreclosures and where we're going to see them from this, I was listening to this really, really fascinating interview with a guy who's just a brilliant economist with as the economy relates to real estate, and in particular residential real estate. And what he was saying is that a huge driving force in the coming foreclosure crisis is going to be what's called late cycle lending. Mm-hmm. And that is the stuff that came late, the mortgages that were originated late in the cycle. So in the last, say, 2 to 3 years, 2017 and later. They're going to experience the greatest stress. They went in with the lowest down payments, the lowest FICO scores, because if you think about it, as real estate cycles, late in the cycle is always when lenders are relax their underwriting guidelines and more people are able to obtain loans than probably should. And so it's always late in the cycle that the weakest loans are made. So the folks that are in that category with low down payments and low FICO scores are going to experience the greatest stress. And you combine that with forbearance and the rapid and immediate fall off in employment, and we're looking at a 2021 foreclosure crisis. By the way, I forget if I mentioned this, but during the Great Recession, after what followed 2008, there were close to just under 10 million housing foreclosures of one flavor or another, either straight up, at the courthouse steps foreclosure of a short sale or a deed in lieu. There were 10 million of them. This fellow that I was listening to being interviewed, he thinks we're going to surpass that based on what he's looking at now. A couple of the positive notes, though. One of the things that I think is going to save the housing market, or at least not save it, but sort of soften the crunch, if you will, soften the ground as it hits it, is the demographic of folks between the ages of 26 to 34 right now. Now you might say, well, those are millennials. And yes, there's the millennials are a little wider, but that age group is that's the age group that housing economists watch, because they're the ones that are most likely to make their first purchase. So they're the most likely first-time home buyers. And that group of people is a very, very large demographic. It's not quite as large as baby boomers, but it's very large. And I mentioned in an email you probably read yesterday that I sent that I think that this age group, you'd argue, they're more interested in experiences and they don't really want to settle down. They want to be nomads if they're single, if they have a family, they like to move around and, they don't want to settle down. Well, I'm arguing that this situation has redefined the meaning of home and has, I think, pointed out how important home is, because throughout this whole pandemic, we have been forced to stay home and we've rediscovered what that means. And there's some upsides to that. We're actually raising our kids and we're not going and eating junk food every day. We're actually cooking. And I haven't cooked so much in my life as I have in the last 6 weeks. So we may see a little bit of a shift in thinking from, experiences to let's plant some roots and let's call this home.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Cam. I mean, the reality is to change the thinking of a group would take a massive shift in the way of life. I mean, the last 6 weeks have been a massive shift in our way of life as the world, not just a country. So if anything was going to change that, I think this might be it. And you might be right. Those 26 to 35-year-olds are going to be saying, hey, this home thing felt good. I need to have a home. I need to have a place where I can be if this ever happens again. And hey, if I can afford it, now might be the best time ever because look at the rates.
Yeah, exactly. So. And the rates are going to get even more compelling as we start to emerge from our shells here.
Right.
Watch on so I can see what dang time it is. A couple other thoughts. There was a really interesting article on Housing Wire today about what some are saying is going to be a wave, if you will, a migratory or a wave away from dense areas, densely populated cities, large, apartment buildings with elevators and, that sort of dense inner city living. And it's a fascinating article. I've read some other things and heard some other things about it from others. And I'm starting to really agree with it. I think that people are, Josh and I were talking earlier about, about a buffet when you go to a restaurant or a hotel and there's a buffet. Well, what's so funny, Josh? My wife hates buffets. She always has. She refuses to eat at a buffet basically because somebody just touched that spoon or that serving thing.
Yeah.
And she has no interest in touching it. And so, I guess you could say that and I feel the same way. We're sort of semi-germaphobes. Well, I think now we're going to be hyper-germaphobes, and not just the two of us. I think as a nation, we're going to be hyper-germaphobes. And so, that sort of germophobic, tendency that's been drilled into our heads now, I think is going to spill over into our lifestyles. And, hey, stay over there. I don't want to be, so can you imagine going to a Keith Urban concert and, you push your way to the front row and you got people right here. Forget it, man. I'd rather watch it on TV.
Yeah. You're right. It's interesting if you guys watching have been to the grocery store lately. You got to wear the mask and you're walking in, and if you see someone without a mask, everyone instantly looks at them like this.
Yeah.
They walk further away from them, even if they're not coughing. We're just grossed out by people as a nation right now. We're like, everyone 6 feet back. And it's not going to go away overnight. It's just not. And I was telling you, my wife works for Disney in the travel division, and she's they're talking about right now, if you guys aren't aware, Disney World, Disneyland completely closed down. Although from what I understand, Disney Shanghai is back open at a drastically reduced capacity rate and doing a lot of different things. But one of the things they're talking about is, I was telling Cam, getting rid of the buffets. And if you go to Disney, there's a buffet at every third restaurant. But think about that now. If you were walking up to a line and there was a buffet of food sitting out and you saw people putting spoons back in the mashed potatoes and the handle drops close to the food, are you now going to pick up that spoon and eat, or are you going to pass it? You pass it. So they're having to change things and change the way they're doing things. but they're not going to, they're just finding new ways to exist in our new world,
It dawned on me that getting rid of buffets might not be a bad thing, especially when you consider the size of this thing right here.
It's kind of hard to eat triple what you should if not just there waiting for you.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to my notes here, the age group 26 to 34 and their now altered perception of the value of home. On the flip side of that, though, remember I said that may cushion the fall for real estate. On the flip side of that, though, we've got baby boomers, right? So that's baby boomers were born between 1944 and 1964. So the oldest baby boomer right now is 76 years old.
Okay.
And our life expectancy runs about 80, something like that. I forget, maybe 81, something like that. And so what we're going to see, as sad as it is a whole bunch of baby boomers passing away and those houses coming into the market. And that is the largest segment of Americans right now. And as we, see this wave of houses coming on the market as baby boomers are exiting, that is going to really impact the supply and demand where, as does any scenario like that. So that's going to add a lot of supply to the marketplace. So we'll see.
Right.
That's about a 10-year thing. Over the next 10 years, we're going to start to see a lot of houses come available because of that. And this is an interesting statistic. The average ownership of a house went from 5 years. 10 years ago, the average ownership was 5 years. It is now 10 years. And I think what's impacted that, so people are just staying in their homes longer. There's a couple of things that have impacted that. A lot of folks, especially if you bought houses between 2012 and 2017, are sitting on a lot of what is called nested equity. No reason to sell. Although we haven't had the big cash out refi boom, there's no reason to sell because you'd have to sell into a very expensive market. So yeah, you'd get a lot for your house, but then if you wanted to move somewhere, you'd have to pay a lot for it. So why sell? Just stay here. That's part of it. And then the other thing that's going on is what they call aging in place. More and more people are aging in their homes as opposed to going to assisted living facilities of one sort or another. And in large part, that's a function of technology, right? We can order stuff and have it delivered. We don't have to go out if we don't want to. And there's all sorts of in-home care options now. There are commercials, every other commercial on television seems like it's, home for mom and this thing and that thing. So folks are aging in place. And so that is extending the length of ownership. So these are just some of the forces that are in play that, what's happening now, are clearly we're about to send a huge shockwave into the housing market. But these are some of the things that were going on before and are going on around us that are going to sort of take some of the shock out of that wave. I find this stuff fascinating. I hope you do too. I know we're going to jump into your questions. We have a title agent joining us in just a moment, and then we're going to jump into your questions. And I know one of them was, good places to invest. And I'm going to come back to this, but I just want to mention, if you're watching at all, the price of oil dipped below zero last week.
Yeah.
The price of oil went below zero. So in other words, if you had a barrel of crude, you'd actually have to pay someone to take it. And that's clearly a function of supply and demand. And also what's playing in the role, a big role in that is storage. There's nowhere to store oil right now. I mean, there are literally tankers sitting offshore as floating storage facilities with oil in them. And so the oil industry is on its ear. And what that's doing is it's impacting a lot of states that are very, gas and oil heavily invested, a lot of jobs. For example, Texas should certainly come to mind. Oklahoma, Wyoming, Alaska, Pennsylvania, big shale oil and shale gas area, and the whole concept of fracking and shale and horizontal drilling, I think, is on hold at best, if not done, because there's so much more capacity than we need right now. Also, Ohio and North Dakota. So if you're wondering which states you might want to look at in terms of expanding into virtual investing, think of those states, because there they are being just mortally wounded by the oil industry and the upheaval going on. Again, Texas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Alaska, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Ohio, and North Dakota. So those are states you may want to consider for that reason. Now, those are people who are going to need your help, and that's what we do. We help people. We help them solve their problems because we have the knowledge, we have the tools, and we have the ability to do that. And when we do that, we're compensated. We're highly compensated for that. But if your goal is ultimately to help people and help them solve their problems, I think you will be wildly successful in this business. If your goal is to make a ton of money, I'm not so sure. If in your heart you intend or you desire to help people, if that's your guiding light, I think your outcome is going to be very, very favorable.
And that's what keeps you in the business. It keeps you there for the long haul, right? Is that guiding light of good versus, I don't want to say evil, but if all you're thinking about is the money, it's not, you need more than that.
Yeah. A couple interesting lessons, and then we'll move into our interview with our title agent coming on here momentarily. I've got houses for sale, as you probably know. I've made several offers since last week, trying to, navigate that, and it's interesting and it's happening. I mean, we're doing business. In fact, at the office, we're funding deals. I don't know if you watch us on Facebook, but we're funding deals. But I have a house for sale that three houses for sale, 2 in Florida, 1 in New York. And I got some feedback from my realtor who had an open house this past weekend at one of the houses in Florida. And what he told me was that there was great feedback on the house. In fact, I think there's at least an offer or 2 coming, but that realtors in general are much more likely to show a vacant house than one that's occupied. And I mean physically show it. Now there's virtual showings going on, and that's really picking up a lot of steam, and that's the wave of the future for sure. But there's still physical showings going on where you can do that. You can't in New York, but in Florida you can. But what the feedback that we got was that in general, realtors, if the house is occupied, they won't go there because it's occupied. And so what that means is vacant houses have, and I asked them about staged houses because, staging is a powerful tool. Chris, thanks for joining us. We'll be with you in just a second. Just finishing up here real quick. But staged houses appear to be occupied, and what the listing agent has to do is convince the buyer's agent that it's actually not.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? So if you have photos online that show staging and it make the house appear to be occupied, you have to literally say, this house is not occupied. It's just staged. Seriously. No, really. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Wow. It is.
And then, the more and more use of electronic lock boxes and things like that for, showings where, there social distancing going on. And part of what I'm looking forward to getting into with our guest, Christine Tartaglia, who will join us in just a second, is the overall efficiency of the business. With digital docs and all the electronic and virtual showings and all of that, what's really happening is that the industry, whether it likes it or not, is becoming more efficient. There's less. There's less, less bottlenecks, less friction, I guess would be a good word to use. It's becoming more efficient. So good timing, Christine. I've unmuted you. I'm sorry we weren't able to see your video today. With us is Ms. Christine Tartaglia from South Jersey Settlement Agency. She's the owner and president of that organization. They're in Vineland, New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey for a number of years when I was a little guy. And we do a ton of our back-to-back closings with Christine. For pretty much anybody who's buying and selling a house in New Jersey, we refer to you, Christine, regardless of where they are in New Jersey, because we just love you. You're that good. And I want to thank you very, very much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know that that was, frankly, an imposition, and I appreciate you being here.
We have an audio problem.
Yeah.
Christine, if you can hear us, you might need to unmute your phone.
Yeah, you're definitely unmuted on Zoom.
Okay, you got me?
There she is. Nice.
Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Did you hear my introduction of you? Did you hear what I said?
I did, and thank you very, very much for that kind and very gracious introduction. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. We just love working with you. In fact, if all I have to do is just mention South Jersey settlement in Julia's presence, and her face lights up. So
yeah, I was gonna say, she gets like rosy cheeks. She loves working with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, we love your team. We love your team too. I mean, we just have such a really nice concrete process of elimination. We all know how to work together. We work together well, and we just get her done, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for taking time out. Got some questions that we thought about that I think will help our guests to kind of get a sense for what's going on in the marketplace. So what are you seeing in the marketplace, and how is your business doing right now? And clearly in New Jersey, you're just as shut down as we are in New York.
Honestly, I don't know. I really can't put a handle on exactly why we are as busy as we are, but we are tearing our hair out with business right now. New orders coming in from the wholesale space. You know, I mean, I really don't understand it. I mean, we're crazy busy right now.
So when you say the wholesale space, you're speaking specifically, you know, our language here. You mean wholesalers like those that we fund deals for. You're seeing a lot of activity from them.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. So South Jersey Settlement Agency is a you know, predominantly a wholesale shop. And, you know, we service the entire real estate community from Cape May all the way to Bergen County. And we've just, you know, we're seeing the deals come in, and they're plentiful. For the most part, we're seeing, you know, assignment transactions. We're not doing a whole lot of double closings at this point. Where there are transactional funds, where the client does require transactional funding. Many of our investors can, you know, they have their own capital to use for the transaction, which helps them on the front end because it helps them save a little bit of money. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, we're rather busy right now. We haven't gotten stale at all. You know, they're challenging times, of course, because we have to work a little differently, and we have to, you know, there's a ton of workarounds around our entire process. Initially, when this first thing started, we didn't really have the technologies to support a remote setting, and all of my people are working from their homes, so I had to invest in the technology to make sure that that could happen, and so that our customers, you know, could get their deals to the finish line, really. And we were able to pull that off. So it was a little kludgy for the first 2 or 3 weeks, but you know, now it seems to be that we're smooth sailing. I usually have at least one person in my office every day, and that person's basically dispatching calls because we really don't want people calling into cell phones at this point. We want everybody calling into our main number and being able to dispatch those calls accordingly. Mm-hmm. It's been a little frustrating for customers, but by the same token, it's working. So
that's great. Yeah. One of the questions that I had was, to what extent had you guys gone virtual? But it sounds like everything in your entire process is virtual right now.
Yeah, everything in the process is virtual. So, we have our person that, does the order entry side, gets the searches ordered and, gets the deals in the system. And then after she gets her part done, she's handing it off. And we have a system, thankfully, we have a system that, quite frankly, I see all this as an opportunity because I've always felt that we didn't really utilize the technologies as they were intended to be used. And it's really forced us to create an online environment because we are constantly killing trees all day, every day by printing documents and sending documents out. And now with, the electronic transmission of data and the use of the internet, it's just helped us become a little bit more savvy, to be honest with you. So I saw it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I welcomed it because it's something that I just honestly, as a business owner, I didn't have the time to sit there and develop a new process because I was so caught up in the day and the time and what we have to do in the here and now. So it kind of forced me to have to do that. But with that being said, I mean, we know that there's still so many questions pertaining to how title agencies are closing the deals during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And, I'm kind of hoping that this is going to provide some guidance to your folks as to what that closing process looks like today, but more so to settle them in knowing that deals are being closed all day, every day. We can do that.
And even in a state as locked down as New Jersey is, so I think many of our listeners are in states that are far less, clamped down. So what you're hearing is what's going on in the midst of about the worst case scenario.
Yeah, as an example, I have a closing next Friday, and we're going to show up at the closing. We're going to the attorney's office. So, they're still having us go in and not doing it virtual, but, so I guess there's the two sides of the coin. But I think one of the big points I want to get across to the folks that are watching this and that will watch this, business is still happening. People are finding ways to make these deals get done. And it's not just the investors who are finding ways. You have the title agents and the attorneys who are finding ways too. And Christine's and her business is a great example of that.
Well, I think the big question in everyone's mind is, the remote closings and whether or not they're legal in our state. And right. People call us all day, every day, asking whether or not they can do it yet. And the short answer is not yet. Unfortunately, the bill is still sitting on Capitol Hill, and until it's signed, it's really not a law. It's just, therefore they're really not permitted. The New Jersey Assembly did pass a bill, number 3903, I believe, which is a different bill that provides almost like immediate ability to sign online, but it allows the notary to only sign certain instruments. So we still have to, there's certain documents that require wet signatures, such as the mortgage, the deed, and the affidavits, and they require witnessing. So, we kind of have had to be a little bit creative, and we have gotten very creative because we come from a place where there's a will, there's a way. Mm-hmm. We want to get our deals done, and we want our partners to, be happy with the services, and we want it to be a win-win for everybody. So honestly, we've done curbside drive-through closings that we call them, where, one person is in their car and we're in our car and we're handing documents out the window, and then they're holding up their license and we're taking a snapshot of their license. We're sending parts of the package by way of UPS and then getting in front of the person with the mandatory items only, so that we're only have to have that FaceTime for a few minutes instead of spending a whole, 25, 30 minutes on a closing. Right. We've done FaceTime, whereby we're taking snapshots of their identifications and walking the parties through the package and telling them where to sign and having them hold it up to us to make sure that it's been done accurate, because, the last thing we want is for the package to get back to us and they didn't sign it in the right place. Right. So, and then we're giving them shipping labels to ship the packages back to us for the next day. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. We need to accommodate all the people out there in the industry, and you know, the people that are buying and selling properties. A lot of times the sellers are of age and they're not familiar with technologies and they're not comfortable with technologies and they don't even have email capacity. So
Right.
we have to work with those. So it really isn't a one size fits all. We need to just kind of accommodate all the folks who are not technologically savvy. And then of course the people that are comfortable with doing it by way of FaceTime, we can do that too. You know, we're not breaking any laws, and as long as we're not breaking any laws, we're just getting them done. And, you know, again, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And what we do is we get in touch with the customers and we explain that, you know, due to the current pandemic situation, we have to, you know, do things a little bit unconventional. And we walk them through that process and we make them understand that at the beginning stage. We do get our pushback. You know, you have your, you know, people that are just not real happy about how things are going because it's taking us longer to do things too. You know, because of the online environment, it's taking us longer to do things. So, you know, people are used to us being able to turn things over within nanoseconds because they're sending us an email, we're parsing it off, we're getting it done, but they don't seem to understand that I've got different skill sets sitting in different locations. And you know, it has to be, at the end of the day, it still has to be buttoned up and it has to be buttoned up properly. So we're just asking for everybody to just kind of be patient for this whole thing. And, you know, if they need us to help them work through their challenges with their sellers and their buyers, or if they are, you know, respectfully the buyers themselves, you know, we'll work it out with them.
So are your team members remote now? You're not in your office, are you?
I personally am in my office today because we're all taking turns.
Okay.
We all take turns to come into the office.
One
so
at a time,
there's
right?
certain functions that we cannot do remotely, like the funding process. You can't fund from a remote location because I might go and have my checks go out to all my funders.
Right.
That would
Right.
be, you know, that's just too scary for me. So we have fundings every day. So somebody has to, you know, someone with that skill has to be present in our office every day.
So one of the bits of feedback I hear from my investor friends and acquaintances that I talk to on a daily basis, and then through my own activity and our customers, is that sellers are much more open to cash offers today than they were even just 6 weeks ago. And that begins to explain the level of business, you know, how busy you are with wholesale transactions in there. So that's sort of a way of confirming that for the folks that are here watching and listening. And by the way, if you've just joined us, the voice you're hearing, who joined by phone, is Christine Tartaglia. She is the owner and president of South Jersey Settlement Agency, and they are an investor-friendly, you know, closing business in New Jersey that we work with closely and have done, you know, I don't know, dozens and dozens of deals with over the years. For our clients in New Jersey where they're utilizing our funding. And I've been trying to get, Josh, you've probably seen me sort of struggling here. I've been trying to get her contact information up on the screen, but I'm having some trouble doing that. Let me give you Christine's phone number and email address. Her email is Chris, C-H-R-I-S, at SJS, so SJSA, so that would be South Jersey Settlement Agency, SJSA title.com. And the number at our office there is 856-690-1121. Chris,
And I know Chelsea is watching us. So Chelsea, please, will you put that information in the comments below us so that everybody can get a hold of that also?
Yeah, and Chelsea, here, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll quick email you that that little bit of contact information that I have that I was trying to show on the screen, but I just simply could not do it. I don't know why. It was really weird. So Christine, are you able to do closings on transactions outside of, I know the answer to this, but I want the folks to hear, outside of the state of New Jersey?
No, so we are strictly a New Jersey agent. Through the years, we've positioned ourselves here in New Jersey as an industry leader in the for investors. We service from Cape May all the way to Bergen County, but unfortunately, we can't go out of state.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. If you live in, Florida or Alabama or Illinois or wherever you are, there are investor-friendly closing agents just like Christine too. And
Yep.
the best thing you can do is ask. And we, considering the number of deals that we fund and have funded over the years, the likelihood of our being able to refer you to a good closing agent in your state is very, very high. All you have to do is ask. We're here for you. Happy to share that information. And by the way, it should go without saying, if you came to us and said, hey, I'm looking for a great closing agent in New Jersey, well, you now know who we would send you. So a couple other questions, Christine, just from the list that I have here. There's talk about a concept of a virtual notary. So tell us what you know about that. How does that work, if you're familiar with it at all, or if it's happening in New Jersey?
Oh, yeah. So the RON, it's called RON, okay, Remote Online Notary. And the long story short is everyone is working tirelessly to ensure that RON readiness is going to be available as soon as the bill gets passed. Unfortunately, it's not passed. So it kind of goes in line with what I said earlier. There are certain instruments where the Assembly had passed the bill 3903. That was the bill, 3903. And it just gave us a different parameters and giving us an immediate ability to sign online, but only for certain instruments, okay? So the state of New Jersey still requires wet signatures on certain documents, which are anything that it needs to be recorded and notarized. So those are the only documents that need to have wet signatures. So we are able to, do the e-signings and whatnot. The problem with the e-sign capabilities is that the lenders have to vet the different e-sign units. So if the lender is not familiar with the e-sign company that we're signed up with or wholesalers signed up with or whatever, then they're not going to allow it. They're going to require wet signatures. So it's not just about the title company, it's all the other people, all of the moving parts. That there are so many moving parts in these transactions.
Yeah.
So if there is a lender tied to it, unfortunately, the lender needs to we need their buy-in on it.
Right. And so you're by the e-sign resource, you're talking about DocuSign or .loop or one of those types of tools, right? Gotcha. Okay.
Yes. So in a cash sale, it works. But in a situation where there is a lender and there are loan documents, the lender has to vet the system.
Right. Got it.
So it's kind of, like I said, it's not a one size fits all. There's a whole nother layer of processes that we add on to the closing process when we get to that stage. So once we're clear to close, we have to now determine, okay, who can do what and who's willing to do what.
Right.
Good. A couple last quick questions. Do you recommend that your clients buy title insurance when they're wholesaling a house? Is that something you recommend?
When they're wholesaling a house, if they're doing a double close, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, clearly, if they're doing an assignment, they're never taking title, so there's no title insurance involved. But
right.
Is it your general recommendation that your clients get title insurance as a matter of protecting the transaction for the long haul? I'm just curious about your opinion on that.
So I don't believe that it's a one size fits all. So if it's a double close and the wholesaler is always going to be taking possession of the property, and then they're going to be auto flipping that to their end buyer. So in the case where they are getting either transactional funding or a funder that is giving them the money to do that, those transactional funders are going to require it.
Right.
In most instances, the transactional funders require a loan policy, because if, God forbid, the end buyer doesn't show up, or the end buyer decides at the last minute that they don't want to go through with the deal, and the deal has funded, then there could potentially be an issue. The reason why people use South Jersey Settlement Agency when they're using transactional funding is that we try to manage that process. Because you guys, if you're involved in the transactional funding side of the business, you're not in the business to lend those monies. That's not what you want to do. You require the wholesaler to sign a mortgage and a note, but the last thing you want is for that mortgage to have to get recorded. So we manage that very, very, carefully. We're not going to. We take the stand that there are no wet funds distributed at the settlement table in a double closing situation. So the sellers have to be in agreement that they're not going to walk away from the table with money. So what I tell everyone is that it really depends on the transactional funding and what funder and what the requirements are. We do charge a second closing fee because we have to fund and we have to do all the other aspects of the transaction. When the deal is done, the job's not over for us. We have to manage the recordation of those documents and make sure that when they come back, that they were not recorded out of sequence. And you'd be surprised how often that does happen. Imagine this, we're sending it out to the county, we're giving them instructions on how to record, but the person that gets it doesn't take the time to read our cover letter. So they're just recording them, and God forbid there have been times where the instruments have been recorded out of sequence. So, for my agency, it's really not worth it for us to do all that work if we're not getting the title on the back end of it. But we obviously will work with the fee structure.
So that leads me right to the next question. This came from one of our clients. They were saying, can you share any tips or tricks to minimize the cost during a double closing?
So what I normally do is any of the ancillary costs that I can put on the B side, that's where they go. So it typically will save the wholesaler about $150, $200. But by the same token, I think the perception out there is that when we do a double closing, we only have to do the deal once. We have to do it twice. Yeah. And it's not that they're easier, they're harder to manage. So if the whole, and I just had this conversation with a wholesaler yesterday because he couldn't understand why, we were charging him he wanted us to kind of like forgo our title insurance fees on the double close. And I'm like, but we're doing double work for you. Why, I had a hard time understanding why they would want the title agent who has gotten their deal to the closing table to not profit from that.
Yeah,
we have to profit too. It's a business, so
exactly.
It's a double-edged sword for them. But we try to make them understand that the job's not done. They're not easier. They're harder.
Yeah.
And I'm using my resources to get them done, so they have to pay for the services rendered.
Sure. Is there ever a scenario where, if I'm the wholesaler, so I'm the buyer in the A to B transaction, and I'm paying for title insurance there to protect my lender funding source, but then on the B to C side, because the transfers taking place, the two transfers are so close together. Is there ever a break in the cost of title insurance because of the short title?
Well, yeah, we're not really charging the ancillary fees. So normally, what happens on an A and a B, there, you see the difference in the charges. So we're putting if we obviously will need a for instance, we have to charge for a good standing letter. So the same good standing letter can be used on the A side and the B side. So we don't charge the A and the B side. You understand what I mean?
Sure.
So if there are certain things that we use for the B side, we charge the B entity, and the A entity, does not get charged for it.
Got it.
That makes sense.
So you're looking for ways to sort of minimize the fees, just as part of your standard operating procedure, is what I'm hearing.
Well, we try to, but I think from our perspective, in the investor business is sometimes it's a little bit high maintenance for us. We're offering so much guidance from start to finish that we expect that to be really a non-issue because we're really the resident expert for them in getting the deal to the finish line.
And you should be compensated for that. And I totally applaud your thinking and your ability to be such a valuable resource to your clients and our clients. So, Josh, you got anything else for Chris?
Yeah, I think one question, obviously we recommend your company, your services when any of our students are doing deals in New Jersey. But for folks who aren't in New Jersey, aren't doing deals in New Jersey, what questions or what should they be looking for in a title agent or a title attorney in their state? Like, is there anything that they should be asking, in your opinion, when they're interviewing folks to do that or trying to see?
Well, sure. I mean, we do workshops throughout the year for our clients, and we kind of cover all the do's and don'ts of real estate investing. And we tell our clients that, we don't really call them clients, we call them partners, because that's what we become. We really try to develop a very strong relationship, a true partnership, if you will. And, we encourage our clients to, and anyone that is trying to get into the investing space, we encourage them to lock arms with a good title insurance company, because having an experienced team on their side will make such a world of difference for them. We provide our customers with the know-how so that they can become pros at what they do. When we first start working with someone, they don't really know, the from A to Z. So what we try to do is I personally stay very close to the first 3 or 4 transactions with my investors, because I like to see how they're working. Number one, we don't work with just anyone. We have an interview with them. We have to have a meeting of the minds. It's important to me that I understand what their business model looks like. Do they understand contracts? Do they understand what they're negotiating with their sellers and their buyers? Because at the end of the day, I can't be doing that for them. So we try to really establish it. I would encourage them to really just establish a solid trust-based relationship with a title insurance company that can provide them with the know-how to get them their deals to the finish line. Period, end of story. They have to be very investor friendly. We have to be at the forefront of negotiating everything with all the different parties. When we get the deal in, we immediately make an opening call to both the seller, the buyer. We make sure that they understand who we are, what we do, what the value that we bring to the table on the transaction. So they really need to align themselves with somebody that can provide them with the guidance that they need to become a successful pro in the business. And we don't expect our investors to be pros out of the gate. We expect them to stop, to listen, to learn, to work through their issues and challenges so that they can get better, because the better they are, the better we are. Yeah. The better their information is that's fed to us, the better we can be at the end. And there's less hiccups.
I think that's a great point right there. A lot of folks who've never done a deal or have never contacted a closing attorney or closing agent, they might think that any question is a stupid question. And the reality, what I just heard you say is ask questions, ask us things. We want to be able to help you, support you, guide you. And so, folks, if you're listening to this and you haven't found your attorney or agent, the person who's going to help you get these deals closed, if they're annoyed with you asking questions, they're sign one, they're not the right company. So.
Exactly. I mean, we're here every step of the way for our clients. We can align them with resources that can help them at each stage until they are comfortable. Yeah. So if they are in the wholesale space and they need to be positioned or they need a mentor by a seasoned wholesaler, we make those introductions. There aren't charges around this. We have a bunch of really good Samaritans that are ready, willing, and able to help people to be able to, to get where they want to go. And we pride ourselves on that.
Well, I can clearly see why you refer to your clients as your partners, and I'm sure they refer to you as their partner as well. Christine, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, and I want you to know we really appreciate it. guys, one more time, just so you have Christine's contact information for your deals in New Jersey. You've been listening to Christine Tartaglia. She is the owner and president of South Jersey Settlement Agency in Vineland, New Jersey. The phone number there, 856-690-1121. And Christine's email address is Chris, CHRIS, at SJSA, like South Jersey Settlement Agency, SJSA title.com. Christine, thank you again. And look forward to continued success with you, and really appreciate you taking time out.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. That was great. Super glad we had her join us, and certainly nice to hear, for you guys in particular, to hear directly from the horse's mouth what's going on. And I've been saying for weeks now, and I'm going to continue to say, that the concept of a virtual closing and virtual showings and virtual real estate are becoming our reality. So you, as a virtual investor, are no longer some sort of outcast. You are part of the mainstream. If you ever had a realtor say to you, and I have, I'm not interested in a buyer, I'm not even going to consider an offer from a buyer who hasn't stepped in the house, who hasn't come and physically seen the house. Well, those days are over, and I couldn't be happier about it. Happier for me and for you. All right, couple quick things I want to cover, and then we're going to jump into your questions. We got a bunch of great ones. Some data information. So Cheryl from my office has provided me with some information specific to the data that we provide our clients, in particular, the cash buyer data feed and the private lender data feed. I'm focused on those today just because there's something really interesting to share. Now I'm going to make an attempt to share my screen here. Okay, good. So what you're looking at is data imported from December 1st, 2019 through the 22nd of April, which is just, about a week ago. And what you'll notice here, and this is fascinating, on a normal, and by the way, we import cash buyer data on a weekly basis. There are other bits of information. There are multiple sources of data that go into this data feed. And some we update more often, some we update less often, but the actual cash buyer data is we run through our algorithms, and then we put in the system on a weekly basis. And you can see here on the left side, the number of new cash buyers that we added in that week. And as we move right, the date, okay? So the date's down along the bottom here. And you can see that as we led up to this whole pandemic thing, there was, pretty normal activity, and then there was quite a surge of cash buyers. We went from, in the 20,000 range, maybe a little under, mid-20s, little maybe closer to 25, and then here closer to 30,000. And all of a sudden, boom, it just dropped off like a rock.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about this is you might think, oh, well, that's because there were no cash transactions, and that, in fact, is not the case. What we've discovered by looking at this, and I had an additional and longer conversation with Cheryl, Josh, that after we talked when you were there. This is a function of reporting. So what happened here this week of March 29th, or leading into that, the end of March, is this whole thing hit hard, and that's when lockdowns happened. So the folks that would normally be working at the county annex, the county courthouse, that are in the recorder's office or in the tax assessor's office, they weren't there. They weren't recording. They weren't assessing, and they weren't reporting to aggregators. So what happened was there was this huge drop, not in cash buyers, but in the data. And now you can see that that's recovering rather quickly because they're figuring out alternative ways to get the job done. And they're maybe taking turns rotating in the office, like Christine just described to us at her office. Although this isn't title now, this is county. This is at a county level. And so we're starting to see that recover very nicely. And what you'll notice is a very similar scenario with the private lender data feed, which I have. This is what was going on before, Josh. I don't know why I can't show anything else. I have the private lender data right here. I've selected it. I'm hitting share, and it keeps coming back to that one. I think I might know how to fix that. Just stand by 1 second. I think I might know what the problem is.
Yeah, I bet you know that little graph you showed where it goes from the end of March, through the first couple of weeks, or maybe it's 3 weeks there. I forget how many bars there were in April. I bet you that's what Christine's closed deal ratio looks like. At the end of March, it probably shrunk down, and then it's getting more and more and more because it's, people are finding ways to get things done. One of my big takeaways from just hearing Christine talk and seeing the things that are happening in our business and the funding, and I'm closed on a deal next week. I got a friend who just put a deal on the market last Friday and had 3 full price offers within 12 hours of putting it on the market. Ended up selling it for $3,500 over asking price and had a bidding war for his property. I'm sharing that so that you guys understand things are still selling. And the reason I want to make sure I emphasize that while I can't pull this up is because we get questions daily. In fact, I've read through a bunch of questions here, even though we're not in the Q&A section yet. People asking, how do I do deals if title agents are closed? How do I do deals if cash buyers are can't get out of their house? Well, the reality is people are finding ways. You're seeing it. You're hearing it. Just because the office is closed doesn't mean the business is closed anymore. And that's something that we're all learning how to do. Now, maybe during that last week of March, we all, had to figure it out. There's a period of time we had to figure out the virtual thing, but we're getting it now. And as you can see, things are still moving forward, just not at the same speed or in the same fashion, but they are moving forward.
Right. So I just learned something. You can have too many desktops open on your Mac for Zoom. So here it is the same, and thank you for filling in the gap there, Josh.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the same period of time with the private lender data. Now, there are far fewer private lenders that come into the data feed just by the nature of the difference between private lenders and cash buyers. But you'll see, we average about, and this is weekly now, we average probably around 2,500, 3,000 a week, which runs about, 12,000 a month. And by the way, that's been very, very consistent. Same thing, about 80,000 cash buyers consistently per month now for years. And same thing, right before the what hit the fan, boom. And this is not a function of there being fewer private lenders to share with you. It's a function of the county recorders being unavailable to record. And so here too, a very similar trajectory in terms of recovering from that. Now, you may have heard me mention this before. I think one of the really great sort of unintended benefits of all of this electronic recording, electronic documentation, is that I believe it, and it's going to lag. It may be months before we see it, but I believe that we're going to start to be to receive more data from the counties where we don't get everything, and you may live in one, and it's frustrating because you might say, well, why don't they report how many bedrooms are in this house in this county and they do in that one? What gives?
My county.
Yeah, your county, exactly. And I've looked at that plenty of times. So I think that with what's going on, we may see a more homogenized reporting coming from all the different counties. And there's like 3,400 or something. It's some crazy number of counties in the U.S. So I'm kind of optimistic about that. All right. So there we go. That's what we've got for you in terms of our guest and observations and things like that. Let's dig into your questions. Josh, I'll go first since my lips are flapping at the moment. This comes, wait a minute. That's not where I was. I wanted to be. Hang on 1 second. Okay. This is from Teresa. Teresa said, in this market, how do we adjust for the changes in determining the after repair value and what that'll be, say 3 to 6 months from now. And then there's a second part of the question about using the formula to come up with your maximum purchase price. What I think you're asking, Teresa, is you're saying, well, how do I know what the after repair value is going to be 3 to 6 months from now? We don't. And by the way, if you do, could you please give me the Powerball number for 6 months from now? That's what the future holds. We don't know. But if you joined us a couple of strategy labs ago, we had our friend, Josh's and my friend Doug Faith from Legacy Capital on. He's a hard money lender, and what he said was, in terms of the way they're doing valuations for their, with the deals that their clients are bringing them, is they're looking at the comps. And remember, we talked about this. The comps are sort of a lagging or trailing indicator, right? The comps tell us what just happened, and we're trying to sort of see into the future, or Teresa is, and we have no way of knowing what the future holds. Pardon me. So what Doug's underwriting team is doing is they're taking the comps, coming up with a value, and then they're adjusting it down by 10 to 15%, just as a way to, add a little insurance to the whole thing, that they don't go and fund a deal that's, overvaluated. So that's my suggestion there. Now you went on to say, Teresa, using your formula, do we use the same numbers or adjust? No, we use the same numbers. Those numbers are universally applicable no matter what the real estate cycle is doing. It's the after repair values that change. And for the last, 4 or 5 or more, 6 years, they've been going up in most markets. Some markets meteorically, some, more along a shallower trajectory, but going up. So that changes, and our cost of repairs change as well. There's another question in here about that I'll get to, but those are the variables. We don't change the formula. What does change is the information going into the formula. All right. Go ahead, Josh. You're up.
All right. I got a question from Gary. He said, last week I asked if there were how to find cash buyers. You guys mentioned the cash buyer data feed. Are there any other ways to find cash buyers? So I wanted to talk about that for a second, because you and I were talking about this earlier today, Cam. There are other ways to find cash buyers. I guess my first question to you, Gary, would be, do you not like going straight to the source where all the proven cash buyers are? Now I say that jokingly, because maybe you don't have cash buyer data feed yet. You don't want to pay for it for some reason. Here's what I would say. There are other ways, and I'm going to give you a few. But I think if you weigh out cost benefits and time, speed to actually finding cash buyer, the cash buyer data feed, it is, man, if I could go back in time and have that when I was getting started in this business, I would have saved hundreds of hours in searching for cash buyers and tons of dead-end roads. However, you can do a few other things. Now, a lot of the things that I'm about to mention are sort of hampered by the fact that you're not allowed to get around people. Networking is a great way. That's a great strategy. Write that down. Networking, great way to find cash buyers at RIAs and local. If you go to a tax sale and you actually show up to this courthouse steps, those are great ways. But guess what's not happening right now? RIA meetings. Sales at the courthouse steps aren't happening in the way that they used to. So you can't network there anymore. You could put out reverse bandit signs. I talked about this maybe in our first strategy lab that we did 6 weeks ago, but you could we're used to seeing bandit signs that say, I buy houses. Well, you can create a reverse bandit sign, which reverse means looking for the buyers instead of sellers. And you could say, create a sign that says 3-bedroom, 2-bath fixer must sell now. Need all cash type of sign. The people who are going to call that are people looking to buy properties, and that's a great way. And it's a strategy I've used since 1998 to find.
Let me jump in. Here's another great reverse bandit sign: handyman special, cheap, cash, and your phone number.
Yeah, that the handyman special, must sell now. Those two little phrases are what buyers, Cam, me, you, are looking for. We're looking for the deal. So I want those people calling me.
Right.
But again, you're going to have to order the signage. You're going to have to either handwrite it or have it printed. It's going to cost you money. And by the time you did all that and got it shipped to you after delayed shipping right now because of the pandemic, you could have already talked to 900 cash buyers in the cash buyer data.
Yeah, so I was sort of joking with Josh earlier when we were preparing before we started live here, and I said, so the best way to get to the grocery store is to drive. Can you please tell me another way? So anyway, not to make fun, there are other ways, but man, I think there's places to cut corners or to try to save a few bucks. I'm not sure that's one of them.
And I wonder if, Gary, I just don't know. I wonder if that question has more to do with, are you having success if you have access to the cash buyer data? Are you having success with it? And if you're not, reevaluating what you're doing there. How are you contacting them? What are you doing? How often? What are you saying? Those might be the points you want to investigate, not find another solution.
Right. So Dan Kennedy always said you have to match your message to your audience. And if your audience isn't responding, work on your messaging. All right. This one came from Joy. It says, if the seller appears to be incompetent to make decisions, so that might, be dementia, who knows, and a power of attorney is not clearly identified, what's the best practice? Should I keep asking questions in hopes of discovering one, a power of attorney? Or perhaps I should use the skip trace to contact a relative. There it is. That's a brilliant idea. Asked and answered. Because, not every seller who has a power of attorney and who has had to face that reality is going to be excited about sharing that with you. I can assure you, when that day comes for me, I'm not going to tell folks that I'm incompetent and, I've got dementia and therefore you're going to need to talk to my daughter. I mean, I suppose I may get to that point, but I just hope, I plan to go snowboarding down a hill like Sonny Bono, right into a tree.
Yep.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Are there any special precautions in dealing with sellers who are elderly or incompetent? You're going to come across them. In fact, a quick story, which is, slightly unrelated but interesting. I'm the vice president of the board of trustees for the Glenn H. Curtis Museum up here, where I live. And by the way, I was a board member for years, and then I missed a meeting, and I found out at the next meeting I was now the vice president. So I learned a lesson: don't ever miss a board meeting. So we're soliciting donations right now because the place is closed. There's no revenue, none, and we've got we still have a lot of costs, sort of like my hotel. And so we had a guy from Ohio who loves the museum and he's been a member for years. He sent a $50,000 donation. 25 of it he wanted to go toward the Warhawk restoration, which is a big project there with a P-41, a World War II aircraft, and 25,000 of it to go to the general fund, basically to cover overhead. And we were all like, the board, we were just like high-fiving each other. Well, 2 weeks later, his daughter called and said, yeah, that isn't happening. You're going to have to send the money back. Because apparently, according to her, he wasn't competent. Talk about disappointing. Oh, my gosh. So you want to try to ferret that out early. And I think you came up with your own answer, Joy, brilliantly. But I might add, use the skip trace, find some relatives, talk to them if you have even an inkling of doubt, because if you get to the closing and then everything works out great, and 2 weeks later or a month or 6 months later, they, now you're in front of a judge and they turn and they reverse that transaction because the seller was incompetent and had no legal authority to sign those docs and make that decision. That's going to be a heck of a lot worse than going the extra mile now if you have any inclination. Great question. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, this is from Bobby. Said virtual wholesaling and scaling into new markets. If your local market is not yielding what you're looking for, what paperwork, legal documents, LLC is needed to accomplish these types of deals, and where do I go? And I think the answer to the paperwork, legal documents, we've always said use the local agreements for the state there, whatever state you're in. I mean, there's a board of realtors contract in every state. That's the safest thing to do. It's just to make sure that you're not using something you shouldn't use. And then contact an agent. Is there anything funny I need to know about in this market as you're going into it? And we've done a bunch of these, and maybe in a future strategy lab, I'll show you how to use the motivated seller data feed software to do some market research. Use the heat maps and stuff. But if you have it, you can go in there and do that yourself. Look at the heat maps. Look where the opportunities are. Look where the buyers of opportunities are. And when those line up, that gives you a pretty good indicator of where you might want to go. But there's other things that can point you in the right direction, especially right now. Cam, you talked a little bit earlier, Cam, about the markets, the oil markets, or where the oil market's fallen through. Those might be great areas to look for deals right now.
Yeah. You want me to run down that list again real quick?
Yeah.
That involves me finding it. Here it is. Texas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Alaska, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Ohio, and North Dakota. Those are the ones that have been hit the hardest by this. And you know what's so interesting? I was listening to these talking heads the other night, and they were speculating that the timing between Russia and the Saudis with their war of capacity that threw the whole world oil market into a tailspin. It literally happened like a couple of days after this pandemic was called a pandemic, and I thought, now is that interesting timing or what? I think a lot of really not so great stuff is going to come out of this once everybody's back to normal and can take a hard look at it. But those states have been hit very, very hard.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, same question came from, effectively the same question came from Teresa about, she said, loving the strategy sessions, great for my mental health. Happy to help with that. If we're going to wholesale in other markets, do we contact an attorney? What about the documents? Well, Josh just answered that really well. And so there you go. So I'm just going to kind of check, mark that one as done because,
I want to make a comment. Teresa said the good for her mental health. I'm glad she thinks that because you know what? It's good for mine too. I really enjoy doing these sessions.
Me too.
I know, Cam, we talk about, this is one of our favorite things to do every week. If you guys are loving these sessions, share that below. But you know what you could really do? Click the share button. This is on Facebook. Share it to your timeline. Anybody who's interested in real estate needs to know what's happening in the market right now, needs guidance or to get questions answered. Share this video with them. I had one of our students, Serge, reached out and said, man, these strategy sessions are gold. More people need to know about them. And I said, tell people. They're free. So we love doing these too, Teresa. We're glad you're here.
Yes, thank you for that comment. And by the way, mental health is something that makes me nervous about this whole thing. I think Dr. Phil in general is kind of a boob, but I think he's right now when he's talking about people's mental health.
Yeah.
But anyway, here's one from Darren. Darren's asked, do you think rehab timelines will get extended due to the restriction of the number of workers who can work on a construction site at the same time? And if so, by how much? Well, the first question, do I think rehab timelines are extended right now because of that? Absolutely, yes. However, the construction restrictions are not in every state. In fact, right. I think there are probably fewer that have those restrictions than don't. Although I don't have like a map of that. I've been looking for one. By the way, if you found or find a map of the United States that spells out what restrictions are active where, and if you could share a link to that within the comments of this, that would be super helpful. I haven't found one, and I'd love to see that. So Darren went on and said, also, do you anticipate housing prices starting to fall due to rising inventories due to fewer buyers being in the market because of so many people who have lost their jobs and iBuyers being gone, also being out of the market, and as well as an influx of new foreclosures? So do I anticipate a downward trend in pricing? Yes, if history repeats itself. there are a lot of forces in play, a lot of forces that are going to, sort of flip the supply and demand equation. Leading into this, there was much greater demand than supply, and that, was a function in large part of the cost to build new houses. Builders had pretty much slowed down, or were only really building high-end houses because they're the only ones they could make any money on, or high-end apartment complexes where, you got rents of $1,700, $2,000, $2,500 a month, because construction materials were in such great demand in places like China and India and the US. The cost to build had gone through the roof. So entry-level workforce housing, you can't build and sell and make any money on. So anyway, the supply demand has flipped to a large degree. There are some things that are making that worse, and there are some things that are taking a little bit of the sting out of it. We discussed them already, and I don't want to repeat that. Yeah, I do anticipate prices falling. I do know that, again, if history repeats itself, there'll be a lag. I think in this disaster and the recession that follows, I think the lag may be a little longer before we start to see housing prices fall dramatically, because of all the forbearances and because of the forgiveness in the marketplace as far as your inability to foreclose, your inability to evict. There's been a lot of things done for consumers that I think, under the circumstances were probably a decent idea. But I also think that we're facing a ginormous moral hazard, and in large part because so many workers are making more money sitting at home right now than they are working. What's their incentive to go back? So yes, I do think prices will fall if history repeats itself. I think there'll be a lag, and I think this lag will be longer than in the past.
And on his first question where he asked, the timelines of rehabs, I think, like you said, it's market specific. It just depends on what the lockdown's like, where they're at. It also, so here in South Carolina, you can have a full crew on a site doing work. But if one person gets sick, the site shuts down and they have to change to a new set of rules. So, it just depends. But the reality is it's certainly not going to be status quo. It's not going to be what it was like in February anymore. It's going to be different. How much different? It's hard to say unless you know your specific market.
It's one worker at a time in New York, and it's certainly extending the timeline. However, you can. Isn't it amazing how we adapt? Humans just have this amazing ability to adapt. So you have them working 2 shifts or 3 shifts. So you have one guy there from 7 to 3:30, another guy there from 3:30 to 11, another guy there from 11 to 7:30. Have some guys there Saturday and Sunday, let them take their Monday, Tuesday off and work Saturday. I mean, you can, if your workers want to work and you want the job done, you can adapt and, go to what would have been 1 shift to 3 shifts. So, if you have a 3-guy crew that now is down to 1, and then, you have them running 3 shifts, that's about a break even, right? So
a friend of mine, golf buddy, runs a golf course here, and they're implementing this strategy where no one has to see anybody they work with. So they have everybody coming in like 45-minute staggered intervals. So the guys can come in and get the equipment to get out in the field, and they're out on the course tinkering with stuff, but they don't have to see each other. So there's only like 1 person in the warehouse at a time, but they have a very tight schedule for having 6 or 7 guys out working, never seeing each other, which is kind of crazy.
That's like the antithesis of Zoom.
Yeah.
No, you may not see each other. And what they really mean is that we don't want you gathering. Yeah,
exactly.
So, all right. Whose turn is it? Mine or yours, Josh?
I can go.
Go.
So this is from Andrew. He said it'd be extremely helpful to know what Josh's calling routine is when he calls a motivated seller data feed. And Andrew asked some specific questions, which I think might go well in a future strategy lab when we can call some sellers, if we can pull that off through the strategy lab. But I'm not sure. We'd have to figure out some technological parts of that. But I wanted to walk you quickly through maybe, Andrew, my process of thinking as I'm getting ready to call and what I'm thinking about when I call. First, I want to make sure I have the list of people that I'm going to call pulled up. I want to have, my phone next to me. I want to not have to be holding a handset so I could take notes. So I usually have earbuds in. I've got them here, these guys. I've read the script. So if I'm using a script, I've read the script. I've read it out loud, so that it's the first time I'm saying it is not just to a live seller. And the reality is, I want to remind myself, I'm trying to do good. This sellers that I need to talk to will want to talk to me. And those that I don't need to talk to won't, and that's okay. And then my job is to dial the phone number, see if they'd like a cash offer on their property. Now, one thing that we've been saying is you might want to inject a little more humanity into your scripts these days. You might want to talk a little bit more about, you hope that their family is doing okay right now. And you might want to talk about how you hope their health is okay and they're staying safe. But one of the big things you also might want to include into that little script that you're saying is that you can actually still buy their house for cash right now. Even though this COVID thing's going on, even though we're in a crisis, you can still buy their property. You can still get them cash for their house, because a lot of people don't know. They just assume I can't sell right now. They have no idea. In fact, a lot of investors think, and we're getting questions from people who are doing deals or active investors saying, how do I do deals if title agents aren't open? And we just talked for 30 minutes to Christine today. And she's so busy, she can't even breathe closing deals for people. So the reality is a lot of folks are making a lot of assumptions. And just to share that information, just to let you know, we can still actually buy your house. We can totally get it done in this market. It's an important thing to say when you're on the phone with somebody. And then using your system, your CRM, whatever it is, to just categorize, the people you have to follow up with, the people who didn't answer, what happens next, and so forth. And like I said, Andrew, maybe one day we'll be able to do some live seller calls on a process like this. However, if you've got access to the Motivated Seller data feed, you can go to the training section and you can go watch videos of Cam and I making seller calls live that we recorded and listen to those.
Okay. So I got a few here from Chelsea that came from the last strategy session that she grabbed off the Facebook comments. So I'll just sort of machine gun through them. This is from Joe. What have you found to be the current seasoning requirements being stipulated by institutions for cash out refinance? I'm not a good guy to answer that question for you. I would talk to a lender. Betting that right now a cash out refi is a little bit of a unicorn. And frankly, what I'm getting at is I don't even know that you could do a cash out refi right now. Yeah. Now, I just did a cash out refi with a private lender, and that worked out beautifully. And by the way, we did a curbside closing on that. And so, but institutional lenders doing cash out refis right now with, the market being so much in flux, I doubt it. All of the non-qualifying mortgages, or what they call non-QM, they're off the table right now. They may, you may start to see a little of it going on, but they're off the table. That's, the type of stuff, non-owner occupied investor loans, low doc loans where maybe you've got a ton of cash, but your income doesn't work, sort of those jumbo loans, things like that are typically considered non-qualifying. That was the first thing to go. I remember reading about that on Monday, like the 20th or just past the middle of March. Yep. So I doubt you're going to find those. Moses says, can Canadian residents, himself specifically, who have entities registered in, say, Nevada, qualify for any financial assistance for investors who are investing in the States? So a foreign, someone living in another country, although that has an entity here, qualify for money, assistance money in America? I doubt it. That's my serious answer. Like, for example, the cruise lines, they all want to bail out. Well, you're sorry, but you're foreign entities. You register your boats in the Netherlands and the Bahamas and wherever. so you're not paying any taxes in America. Why should you be part of a bailout being, done with American tax dollars? Now,
Right.
Moses, your point is you have an entity in the U.S. I doubt it. I know, I applied for a PPP, and it was very specific about foreign and a foreign or non-foreign ownership or employees. It was very specific about that. By the way, I should mention, for the first time in a while, I got a little piece of good news today. The PPP loan for this business, the one that Josh and I are partners in, where we provide all these tools, got approved today. Yay. So that was really nice to hear. Now, they seem to be changing the rules, and whether or not it's going to be forgiven, I don't know, or whether or not forgiving it is going to mean effectively selling your soul to the devil.
Right.
I don't know. So that's something we're going to have to evaluate, Josh.
That's a whole nother hour-long conversation we could have about
where I have to grab these Cam's cynical knob and turn it way down. Marianne, can you have the close? We did that. We covered that. And Kevin, our hedge fund's still in play. So iBuyers, in effect, meaning instant buyers or institutional buyers, no, they're off the table right now. But there are some iBuyers that are backed by hedge funds and Wall Street money, and that's all dried up, at least for now, which is creating a very interesting opportunity for us, because there's just so much less competitors, so far fewer competitors in the marketplace. So much of the competition is basically, rolled up the rug and left, which I love to see. And I don't know when or if we're going to see iBuyers come back. What makes the real estate business work for them is a stable market.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're going to have a stable market for quite a while. Now, once the market sort of finds itself, finds its bottom, and the big hedge funds start coming back in, that's going to be a sign, certainly for me, that it's time to buy and hold again.
Yeah.
I've been, you've heard me talk about it, I've been quietly sort of selling off a lot of real estate assets over the last 18 months because I knew that the market was just not sustainable for a whole lot longer, and that it had to cycle. It was desperately in need of a reset. I had no idea what would bring it about. I just knew that if history repeats itself, and it always does in real estate cycles, that it was coming.
Yeah.
And so, but just the same, I'm looking forward to when I feel confident to go out and start buying for long-term holds. I mean, basically everything I sold was stuff I had been holding.
Yeah.
And I've done it twice at least twice, but after the 2008 crash, leading into that, I had sold all of my rental houses, and not because I had this sort of wisdom or crystal ball, but because we moved and because we decided we wanted to raise Nicole where we grew up. And so we left Florida, and it just didn't make sense for me to own all these houses down here. And I decided to start liquidating them, and I sold them all off 2002, 3, 4, 5. It was brilliant timing, but not because I'm brilliant. It was just the where we were with our life, and a clear-headed decision I made in terms of the quality of my life. So we sold it all off. Market crashed. 2010, I started buying back in the same area at prices I had paid in 1993. And then when prices had corrected, I started selling again in the last 12 to maybe 18 months. I'm going to do it again. Do it again. And I'll tell you what, this time around, I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to do it in a way bigger way. The last time around, it was, I kind of just did it on my own with just my resources. Next time around, I'm going to invite some people to the party. So we'll see about that. Philip asked, what are the best ways to identify states, cities, and markets that are least affected by COVID-19? There, if you can Google, or if one of you guys has access, maybe you've saved to your favorites, or you've got a link to one of those maps that shows the concentration of infections and deaths and recoveries by on a U.S. map. It's out there. You can Google it. What I think is more interesting is where the economic impact has had the greatest impact, the downturn in the economy. So, for example, the worst state in America is New York. Do I recommend you go and start investing in New York? Heck no. No, that state is so screwed up. I mean, I heard a thing last night. I was listening to this really successful realtor out of Manhattan, and she was saying that, oh, there's going to be some amazing bargains in Manhattan. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, you can get that 800 square foot studio for $2 million instead of the $4 million that it just sold for. Good luck getting, any sort of cash flow out of that. Now, maybe you can flip properties, if you're in New York, if you're in New York City, there's going to be opportunities. But if you're looking to virtually invest in other areas, I wouldn't come to New York. The taxation, the leadership, the politics, it's not particularly business friendly. It's sort of like California, although there's a lot of money to be made in New York and California, but it's not where I would recommend you extend your reach to. I'd go to a more friendly, tax friendly, maybe sunnier market where there's that's more landlord friendly, those kinds of things. And I read that list of states that have been most widely impacted by the oil prices and the crash. You look at Texas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Alaska, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Ohio, North Dakota. Those are, there's state income taxes in many of those states, but those are pretty friendly, tax-friendly states. Yep. New York and California are not on that list. All right, that's all I got on that. Josh, you take the next one.
We are actually running up against our time.
Oh yeah, we are.
We're going pretty late, so maybe we should cut it for today.
Okay, very good. Well, if we didn't get to your questions, please don't take it personally. We're trying to, deliver a nice balance of what's happening right now, bring in a guest with some good information, and then do your questions during these strategy labs. But if we did not get to your question, I assure you we'll do our best to get to it next week. So, for example, some of the ones we answered this week, we got last week. So for your questions, please send them to comments@realestatewealthnetwork.com. Comments, plural, @realestatewealthnetwork.com. We will be back next week for Strategy Lab number 7. And we're going to continue to do this for the foreseeable future and continue together to watch this whole thing unfold and, provide you with a place to sort of get away from your whatever else you might be doing to come and be part of our community, this community. And we sure do appreciate you being here and taking time away from whatever else you might have been doing. Josh, you got anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
I'll just echo your sentiment there. We're really glad that you took the time to be here with us today. And if you've been with us since the start, thank you so much. If you're enjoying these sessions, let us know below. Hit the share button on your screen. Share this with folks that you think might like it too. It's as you can tell, we don't pitch anything on here. It's all content. So we're glad to be able to help you guys and bring you the answers that you need right now, because it's the right thing to do, and we're happy to do it. So we're in this
and we
together.
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
In particular, your comments are, I said this last time, your comments are like the gas that makes this engine work. So please leave a comment below. Tell us what you think. Tell us where you're from. And we'll look forward to seeing you a week from today. We do these, as you know, live on Facebook Thursdays at noon. And then if you happen to be watching this on the blog, on the replay, we'd love to get a comment from you there as well. So thanks again for joining us. Stay safe, stay healthy, and just love on those people around you, because that's your support system. And be a leader. Be a leader. People are watching. And character, they say, is what you do when you think no one's watching. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
All right.